The Anglo-Saxons also gave us something else that defines us even more than our language. The idea of England itself as a country. In the 9th century, England wasn't one country. It was fragmented into small independent kingdoms. The biggest and most dominant were Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia, and Wessex. The process that unites the kingdoms into one was started by King Alfred of Wessex. He joined the kingdoms together, appealing to their common language, law, and customs. But what gave Alfred the impetus and opportunity to unify the kingdoms was that they were all under threat from a new group of invaders who were attacking the country. These invaders came from Scandinavia, and we called them the Vikings. Raiders from Norway and Denmark came across here and attacked all down the east coast and some even as far as the west coast. Sometimes they took what they wanted and went away. Later on, they took what they wanted and stayed. We call them Vikings, but they didn't call themselves Vikings, because that's just a rude word for pirates. Attracted by the wealth of England and pushed out by the harsh conditions of their homelands, they came over in droves. And though some of them were just in it for the gold and glory, many of them were settlers looking for somewhere else to live. They came over in such numbers that initially Alfred was forced to make a deal with them. In the end, Alfred and the Vikings signed a treaty, the Treaty of Wedmore, and they agreed to divide up the country. Quite simply, they drew a line. If you lived on one side, you lived in England. If you lived on the other side, you lived in an area known as Danelaw. The line went from here up to here. It cut the country in two. The English had the south and the Vikings had the north. It was the start of something that shapes England's character today, the north-south divide. And the Vikings didn't just start it, they still influence it. There are differences on either side of the line that can be traced back to the differences between Vikings and Anglo-Saxons. The most obvious is place names. North of the Danelaw line, places have Viking names. They end in words like Thwaite, meaning meadow, By, meaning farm, and Thorpe, meaning village. Down south, the names are Anglo-Saxon. Anything with Bury, meaning fort, Ham, meaning village, and Bourne, meaning stream. But their legacy goes deeper than just words. The Viking domination of the north was so complete that today, 1,000 years after they first arrived, the people from the area that used to be the Danelaw have a different genetic makeup to those who came from outside it. And this can be traced directly back to the Vikings and identified in your DNA. Best way to find DNA is take a very small toilet brush like this and you hurt it on your back end and get some cells on it, and then you send it off to the lab. The lab will analyze my Y chromosome, one of the 46 chromosomes that make up the genetic blueprint that determines who we are. Women don't have Y chromosomes, only men do, so they're inherited directly down the male line from father to son. They hardly change from one generation to another. My Y chromosome looks just like my dad's, and that looks like his dad's, and his dad's, and his dad's. And from it, I'll find out if I have Viking ancestors. Unlikely, because I'm not from the north. The area that was the Danelaw. You're the prof who knows about these, checking these DNA babies all the way back, and I know about the Y chromosome. I heard about this, which was the logic that men have XY and women have XX. Transvestites, God knows what's going on. But up the Y channel, up me and my dad and going up there, there's a logic that the Y chromosome gets passed down.
Yeah. We take the fingerprint from your Y chromosome and we compare it, if we're trying to see whether you're a Viking or a Celt or a Saxon or something like that. We compare it with people from Norway, in the case of Vikings, see if it matches up with them.
Right.
And from other parts of Europe.
Have I passed?
Have you passed the Viking test?
The Viking test, yes.
Have you passed the Viking test? There's a whole load of numbers there, and those we can compare. I mean, you could almost read that right across like as a credit card number.
I could plug that one in a lottery and see if I could win.
You could actually, it's not bad. Yeah.
I'll read them out, shall I?
Yeah, right.
16.
Like a 16 is different.
These numbers represent the makeup of my Y chromosome.
Number 11.
If I match someone we think is descended from a Norse or Danish Viking, then the chances are that I'm descended from one too.
12.
Yeah, we would have been about 12,000 different people. And you, that little tinkle tells me that you don't match any of them.
Can I phone a friend?
Since I don't match anyone exactly, Brian compares me with people who are similar. From looking at my Y chromosome, it becomes clear I'm not a Viking.
It's likely from this analysis to have come from maybe the near continent. It could have come over to England with the Saxons or with some other movement, but its distribution within the southern part of England rather than Scotland, North and Shetland and so on, it's just not really a Viking Y chromosome.
It's not surprising I don't have a Viking Y chromosome because my family comes from the south of England. Brian's research shows that twice as many northerners as southerners are probably descended from Norse Vikings. Therefore, I'd be much more likely to have a Viking Y chromosome if I came from the north, the area that was once inside the Danelaw. To test the theory, we took a random sample of northerners and southerners. They're all here today to watch Chelsea play Blackburn Rovers in a Premiership football match. Half of them are Chelsea fans, half of them are Blackburn fans. On the outside, they look much the same. They look like football fans. But on the inside, they're probably a bit different, because in the 9th century, Chelsea was in the south, in England, and Blackburn was in the north, in the Danelaw. This means that twice as many Blackburn fans should be descended from Vikings as Chelsea ones. To find out, all we have to do is take their DNA and send it off to the lab. But the Viking legacy isn't just in the blood. It's also argued that Viking culture has left a strong mark on the North, and that differences in attitudes which exist today between the North and the South can be traced directly back to the Vikings. We discovered what people thought were the 3 biggest differences between Northerners and Southerners, and then asked if there was any historical basis for these perceived differences. Difference number 1.
People from the north can be a bit more aggressive.
Northerners are a bit less namby-pamby than Southerners.
They're a bit harsher than we are down south.
Just as Northerners are considered tough, so were the Vikings. One group had a particularly fierce reputation.
Berserkers were a subgroup of Vikings who are quite well documented. These were Vikings who allegedly could bite through their shields, they could run at the enemy, and they could destroy a shield wall, seemingly impervious to pain.
Difference number 2.
They can be friendlier up north.
The northern is probably a bit more friendly, a bit more open with people, whereas the southern is a bit more reserved, I suppose.
There is this preconception that the Vikings were just barbarians, they were godless, therefore they were lawless. But in fact they had a very well-structured society, perhaps based on the ship, which could take them all around the world, and a good crew being forged together would ultimately forge together all the farms that these warriors had come from, and ultimately the area that they came from.
Difference number 3.
Up north, we like to spend money on nice designer clothes.
Ladies from the north from 16 to 60 dress exactly the same. Short skirts, and no matter what the weather is, low-cut tops, which is nice.
The Vikings could take the time and trouble to show themselves off. They would. They even invented false things to show themselves off, such as ladies who were given keys made of leather. These keys could not have opened any locks, but from a distance, the lady would look quite rich.
So the legacy of Viking culture lives on in the North-South divide. For our DNA sample to fit with the national averages, it should show that twice as many Blackburn fans as Chelsea ones have Viking genes. And when our results came back from the lab, Chelsea has 1 Viking, Blackburn 2.